Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I've got a COVID, so I'm not that well, but I'm feeling okay. Feeling good.
It sucks to be under the weather, but I'm happy to have you. We're going to try and keep today brief. There's lots to talk about. But how was your week? What one interesting thing happened this week that you're excited about?
I'm very excited about understanding how AI is influencing the decisions that are being made in the defense area, in both international and local defense. We have we've mentioned this before. We spoke about Anduril. We've written about it. We've spoken about some of the innovations that are happening. But I was able to finish a book called Unit X. Unit X is the subtitle of the book is, let me see here, How the Pentagon and Silicon Valley Are Transforming the Future of War by Raj Shaw and Christopher Kirchhoff. Yeah, so that was an interesting book to read. We can talk about that. There's some key points that I'd like to mention here that are very specific to AI technology. But I think overall, it's a good case study in how businesses, organizations, associations are adopting AI. And the real obstacles are not the technology. It's not even the ethics. It's not even the stuff that we have mentioned before in terms of like understanding how this technology is going to be practical. It is politics. It is bureaucracy. It's all of the typical things that you would expect to find when you are trying to introduce new technology into an organization. So yeah, I think it's just an interesting case study. It's obviously the DoD is the largest employer in the world. It's also the largest spender in the world. So if we can see that as a case study, and then we can work backwards from there. So that's this week's really interesting idea that's in my head. And yeah, apart from some of the other news that we've seen.
Well, I love that. I'll probably poke right into it at the beginning. This week, I'll tell you what I'm excited about. So, I loved our conversations around building products and pushing to use some of the newer development workflows. So, I program, I write code, Python, HTML, JavaScript, etc. And even though I use AI in some of my workflows, it has always been like a traditional workflow augmented by AI. And over the last couple of weeks, I have been seeing so much excitement around tools like Cursor combined with Claude 3.5 with Replit, and just something so automated where you can just prompt and edit your code rather than coding first. And so I'm excited to try that. We have some projects that we're working on internally that I think will be so much fun to execute. And at the same time, we saw some interesting funding news around a lot of these code writing software. So I'm excited to talk about that. But
Yeah, let's talk about that because I think we are not the only ones who are sharing in the excitement of seeing practical applications of AI in engineering and coding. Codium was one of the companies that raised a significant round. Magic, another one. So we're seeing companies both deliver a product that can be used. Revenues are up in all cases, and it looks like the second and third round investments that these companies are receiving are validation that they've actually got some product market fit. So let's talk a little bit about what these products do. Why are they important? Why should people care about it? And why is so much money going to these companies?
sure. So let's kind of frame the landscape, right? You have companies like Anysphere that raised money last week, I believe, for their coding startup. You have the giant in the room, which is GitHub Copilot, which is owned by Microsoft. And the numbers out of GitHub Copilot are astonishing. When Microsoft had their last earnings call, they said the amount of money that they're making through GitHub Copilot is no more than what they paid for GitHub when they just acquired it. That is
Insane.
impressive, right? You have companies like Tab9, companies like Magic, and all of these companies are vying for this massive market that investors and also analysts believe will be the future of code writing. And if you're talking about writing code, that's the future of software development, which is basically everything, right? And so everybody is trying to distinguish themselves. So I'll talk about what I'm most excited about this week. Of the two companies, you have Codium, you have Magic. Both of them raised a lot of money. Codium is $150 million dollars, and it's their Series C, even though they're just 3 years old. And what's interesting is that Codium just raised a round, I believe, in January, just a few months ago. And they're back again raising more money, even though, according to the founder, they haven't even touched the money that they raised previously. And so,
Let's just put a pin in that. I think this is a strategic decision on behalf of these companies. The availability and the speed at which they can get this funding is, present right now. It's something that can be valuable. We don't know what a year or two is going to look like. We don't know whether the bubble bursts and suddenly it becomes difficult to raise money. So I think it's smart to be raising money now, and they will then have that war chest to be able to do with as they wish as they move forward. And I think probably have to navigate a period where things aren't great. It's kind of inevitable that there's going to be some kind of, you know, bubble bursting or reality check or something like that where things will slow down and it'll be difficult to raise money. So I actually like this strategy, raising money while you can.
yeah, building frontier models, building foundation models, especially in something like software development, this will be very expensive. And I have a feeling this will probably be the smallest round that they're going to raise for a while, if they're keeping pace with some of the bigger players. And we'll talk about some of the numbers that we're hearing about OpenAI's next funding round. But you'll recognize very quickly that if you're not able to fundraise, if you're not able to keep that cash flow, you're going to fizzle very quickly. And we've seen companies already this year exit the space, and I believe you're going to see that also within the AI coding space. And so Codium, they're backed by big names. We're seeing Kleiner Perkins, we're seeing Green Oaks. So really big venture funds are behind Codium. And what's most impressive are their numbers. So it's not just like, hey, we're trying this tool or we're trying to build this product. They have solid enterprise numbers and clients, over 700,000 users, more than 1,000 enterprise customers. And we're talking Anduril, Zillow, Dell. The who's who in enterprise are leaning on their tools to augment their workflow. All right. Second company, and this one I'm super excited about, Magic. And their name says it all. Magic raised $320 million. Again, these are big numbers that we're talking about. They also announced a partnership with Google to build two supercomputers. And so this is a huge win for Google, because I think Google is behind in terms of engaging the developer community. We have seen them do some pushes over the last few months, but of course, Microsoft with their partnership with GitHub, they have the lion's share. So if Google can shore up the developer community and engagement with tools like Magic, that'll be great. So they're working with them to build two supercomputers, but they also released some updates on their research. Now, what Magic is famous for is what we call ultra long context windows. And the context window for an AI model is how much data you can process at any given time. So that includes the prompt that you give to it and the responses that it gives back to you.
Right. Inputs and outputs.
Inputs and outputs, right. And so if you imagine you're writing code, it's different from when you're just talking with a chatbot and you have a quick prompt that you're sending in. You'll want the AI to have the context of your entire code base, so it can find the right files and it can check to see how things are related to each other. Now, with Magic, they have done a lot of research on ultra long context windows, and we're talking context lengths of 100 million tokens. Now, I need to put that in context so you can appreciate that. Right now, most of the models that you're using, like a GPT-4 or even a Gemini, they'll range from maybe 40,000 tokens to Gemini 1.5, which is the largest, at 2 million. I just said Magic is at 100 million. They gave some examples. They're like, that is equivalent to roughly 750 novels. That's a lot of data. And when you think of a business, if you're thinking, okay, where's the future of AI? Well, talk about an AI model that has all of the data within your company and it can understand it in real time and process it right away. And this is very important because most models, you're talking about pre-trained data. So you need to train the model on
Right.
the data and then use it. We're now saying you can, in real time, educate a model with up to 750 books of data. That's impressive. I think they're going to do really well. I
Yeah.
can see why companies are excited to put their investors are excited to put their money behind them.
Yeah, I think this is impressive in a couple of ways. One is, as you said, the metaphor of the size is really important. If you're driving in your car right now, listening to this podcast, look at the size of the volume control button for your audio system. That is about the size of the current model. The next size up is going to be the size of your car, right? So these are exponential, improvements. The This is also going to happen with ChatGPT 4 to 5. We'll see a similar kind of increase in context window size. And this is going to also do something which we've discussed before, and that's going to put an expensive strain on the compute. This is why energy needs to be discussed as well. As we get larger context windows, as we get these supercomputers fired up, Magic needs the money just to fuel these things. The biggest expense upfront, of course, is buying NVIDIA's chips. The second expense is keeping those chips running. And as we heard from Taurus's CEO, Nate Walkinshaw, this week, a single chip might cost the equivalent electricity of 33,000 homes.
Crazy.
This is incredible. We're, we're talking about a massive demand on the grid, and we're going to have to do something really interesting. Eric Schmidt was saying, we need to go to Canada and start, talking to them about using their hydroelectric schemes. We need to go to, the nuclear industry and ask them what they can do to fire up new plants or, reignite old plants. This is a real story. So in fact, I spoke to a very successful CEO who's just had a big exit and is working on his next project. I can't reveal all the details, but let me just tell you that it's going to be understanding the energy space and putting the knowledge of what's happening in the grid in the hands of investors and consumer investors as well. So that's really, really interesting to see. Like this, right now, it's very opaque. We don't really know what's going on, but trying to see what we might be able to do in order to understand what the grid load is going to be a big story.
I love that. And of course, the practical applications of tools like Codium and Magic. When I mentioned earlier that I am rethinking my coding workflow, you have to think the history of app development, software development, website coding has been okay. You need to learn a specific language. You need to be able to fix bugs in that language. Then you need to spin up servers. You need to do orchestration and management of the servers. It's been tough, but we have been able to survive and to manage and to thrive. We have had entire careers and industries built on it. And now you're entering a new paradigm where you can create code by writing what you think. There's this viral video of an 8-year-old girl who is writing. It's crazy when you think of the potential for anyone now to create software to do anything that they want. And again, I was screaming, "SAS is dead, SAS is dead," and this also plays to that narrative, right? When you think of a reality where software, and one of the things that Magic showed was almost a real-time UI generation where you could spin up a UI from scratch. And we're not talking about just using something like a pre-built design system. It will be able to get custom elements from your code base and build a UI in real time with those elements. And so the context length, the capabilities in terms of reasoning for the models is increasing to the level where this is going to be a reality for many people. And I think it's an exciting time. I think I love that feel when I'm at the frontier of something different and new. And that's what I'll be doing. So if you're interested in learning how to build tools without coding, I'll probably start a mini series drop a comment below. We'll see how detailed we'll want to make that series. But we'll do it for a beginner if you have no coding experience. We'll kind of walk you through what we're doing, how we're approaching the workflow, and you'll be able to build your own tools also. So excited about that.
Yeah, very exciting. I think part of this is also just you mentioned that 8-year-old coding. What we're going to see is engineering just become increasingly more accessible and available as a path. We instead of saying, "Hey, listen, you're going to have to, do great at high school and then go to MIT or Georgia Tech or whatever and get an engineering degree." Really, what we're saying here is we're making this software creation process available to everybody. Just like learning a language like English or Spanish is available to everybody. If you're a 4-year-old and you want to learn a new language, you can do that. If you're a 4-year-old and you want to start coding stuff, you want to start creating games, you want to start building your own environments, the cloud environments that are available to us and the software tools that are now available to create that software, we've built the machine that builds the machine. And so we're just going to see more and more of that. And we're going to see the fact that so many more people can be involved in this process, make it less exclusive, make it less, a case of, being an elite group of individuals who can do this, and rather, hey, everybody can do this. Everybody can make what they want to make. How is that going to change business models? How is that going to change the marketplace where everybody can create whatever they want whenever they want? It's going to be really interesting to see how this unfolds.
Agreed. And I can't stress that enough because sometimes the narrative around the tools as well, you're going to be putting software developers out of a job. What I'll say is, as a software developer, or well, I'll say as someone who writes code, I couldn't be more excited to not have to deal with the grunt work of writing, fixing bugs and going to check on different libraries and documentation. If I can have an assistant that can accelerate that process and I can focus more on the creative side of coding where I'm problem solving or I'm thinking, okay, what is the utility of what I'm trying to implement? That gets me excited, and I'm excited to right. see other people into the field to bring a different perspective, to solve different problems, because we have so many things that software can help with, but we just haven't been able to prioritize them because sometimes the louder voices or the wealthier voices pull all of that talent away. And so now you'll be able to have somebody in a small village or a small community say, hey, we need a tool for our classroom. We need a tool for our town. We need a tool for our city council. And to be able to spin up a tool that does exactly that. Brilliant.
And like you said, you're going to be sharing some of the things that you're doing. I know yesterday you started fiddling around with vo.dev. This is a chat-based web development companion that really is actually quite impressive. You had introduced me to it. I shared it with a couple of folks that I've been working with. They were able to spin up some new UI concepts on the fly. Really just probably reduced the amount of work that was necessary to just view these new UI components from days to, just a few minutes. So really interesting. Again, it's a companion. This is not necessarily there to replace your knowledge or your expertise in terms of what is UI, what is UX, what's a dark pattern versus light pattern. All of these things still need to be understood in order to use these tools correctly. But these companions are speeding up that idea to shipped product cycle, which is exactly what we're trying to do here. Is how do we go from idea to thing that we can actually see and use and test in a live environment in the shortest amount of time? Because that's when the excitement is happening, right? When you're working on something new, you can lose a lot of momentum when you get stuck into we got to wait 6 weeks for this to be made, or this team needs to be activated in order for that thing to be created. Now you can actually go and see if this thing is as powerful as you think it is. You can test it out and get that idea in front of customers as soon as you can. So really excited about this. As a prototyping fanatic, I'm really excited to see how that works.
All right, excellent. Let's kind of shift gears. A couple other top stories that I want us to touch on. This week, NVIDIA had their earnings. Of course, it was a beat. Anybody in the industry that was paying attention could tell you that they're backlogged in terms of orders for their GPUs for years. everyone wants a piece of their GPUs, and you do have startups that are trying to challenge them, that are coming up with innovative ways in which you'll be able to distinguish yourselves from NVIDIA. And I'm going to call out two of them. If you hop on over to Maginative.com, you're going to see that IBM released their Telum 2 processor and their Spire AI accelerator. For enterprises, this is going to be great. So if you're looking to run models on-prem, this is going to be a very interesting tool for you to look into. We saw Aleph Alpha announce Faria. It's an open weights EU compliant model, and that's important because, of course, with a lot of the AI regulation that we're seeing, we discussed it extensively last week. We discussed the California bill last week that got passed yesterday. So there's a lot changing on the regulation front, and so you'll need to start making decisions as to which models you can use based on the region that you're in. And we have heard from certain providers like Meta that they won't be releasing the next version of Llama, which will be multimodal. And of course, Llama is the most popular open weights model right now. They won't be releasing it in the EU because of the complications around their AI regulation. And so you'll have tangible decisions that tangible impacts that these decisions will make. And so Aleph Alpha released an open weights model. It's not as capable as a Llama, but at least you'll have an option if you're in the EU and you need an open weights model. And then the big one that I wanted to touch on was Cerebras. So Cerebras launched a new AI inference service this week. Now, inference is when let's say you're using ChatGPT, you send a prompt over to ChatGPT. That is inference. You send a prompt there and it gives you back a response, right? And we usually have to deal with latency because it's going over the internet, it's going to the GPUs, and then it's coming back. And that has been the big blocker, right? Like when you talk about like voice AI and you're talking to an AI model and you ask a question and then there's this delay, it breaks the illusion, right? And you're like, oh, the magic disappears. Cerebras unveiled an inference technology that is 20 times faster than GPUs, and it's 1/5 the cost. Yep. And this is amazing. Impressive because if you go on Maginative, you find that story, there is this side-by-side demo. And if you blink, you'll miss it. But like as soon as you hit play, Cerebras is done. And then all you're watching for the rest of the demo is the time it would take for a traditional GPU to process a request and get it back. And so they use Llama as an example. And you just see it's pretty much what you're seeing today in terms of the response time. But imagine cutting that time down by like 1/20th. That is impressive, and the costs that go alongside that are amazing also. So I think we're excited about the next generation of models that are coming out. We spoke about extremely long context windows. That's going to be great. But you're also likely going to start seeing really great inference speeds for these models. So the delays that you'd normally see won't be there as much. And so when you're dealing with robots and embodied AI, when you're dealing with voice assistants, is going to feel a lot more intuitive, a lot more fluid as you're interacting with them.
Yeah, so there's a fun game that I play with my 8-year-old. He talks and I try and copy him in real time. And the idea there is to teach inference. How can you infer what they're about to say by speaking in real time with them? And you keep eye contact and you watch their mouths, and it's a very funny game. You know, obviously there's hilarity involved in this, but the idea is you get better and better at it, and your brain actually gets good at understanding what's about to happen. And that's really what inference is suggesting. Is inference is taking AI to that next level, which is we're not just going to wait for you to tell us what we need to be doing, but rather we're going to infer what needs to be done by understanding how this interaction has happened in the past or what we've been trained to see. So that's why the speed increases. You're essentially just making assumptions, and those assumptions are informed by the training.
Yep. And so this week, again, big week for NVIDIA. Their numbers are up. But speaking of money in AI, OpenAI is also raising their next round. And guess who wants to be a part of that? NVIDIA.
It's shocking.
Just
Yeah.
like
So I've got a question for you. I was reading this and wondering, is this partly because they see if it's, they're in that situation where they're sitting on a big, big war chest themselves, they tons of money in their bank right now, massive valuation. Do they share that and create these investments where they can see the demand of the market being fulfilled as opposed to creating, a singular place where people can go and buy their product? And I think this is a question really more than a statement. I think they're betting on the fact that they can invest in other companies and allow, because OpenAI wants to build its own chips. All these companies want to build their own chips. Why not give them the money to go and do that? And also, I'm guessing some IP that they sell to them at the same time. And probably it works out to be like, hey, we'll give you $100 million. We'll also sell you the technology for $100 million so you can build your own fab. Kind of works out.
so it's a great question, and what I will say is that NVIDIA has been Jensen Huang has been very strategic over the last decade in terms of investments. That's one thing that I really commend them on. Even over the last year, when you talk about companies that have been investing in startups, NVIDIA has been a part of some of the hottest names in the industry. They're behind the scenes, giving them money, but as you're saying, they're also obviously providing them with the infrastructure that they need for training and the inference. And so I do think there is a big element where they're trying to move away from just being the GPU providers of the industry to doing so much more. And you see it in their ambition. Exactly, right? Like you see it with their NVIDIA NIMs, where they're looking to start providing services on top of their infrastructure and hardware. And as you're saying, diversifying that reach. Now, the perspective I'll give is that we don't have enough chips, we don't have enough fabs, we don't have enough chip designers, we don't have enough companies working on it. Like we don't have enough of a lot. we are behind, and so NVIDIA is probably thinking we will take all the help that we can get right now, especially if we will have also a stake in the game there. Yeah. And so you're
seeing a rising tide raises all boats.
Exactly. And so you're seeing Apple obviously has their M1 chips. Meta is working on their chips. Microsoft is working on their chips. Google has their chips. And OpenAI is going to be working on. So you'll see chips probably go internal because companies want to figure out how they can get that advantage. But there will still be this massive market for NVIDIA to consume with their GPU technology. And so I think it's a smart bet because ultimately GPUs may not be the optimal infrastructure for AI. Right now, it's a general purpose product that can be used for automation, for robotics, for so many different elements. And so once we start specializing into the Cerebrus of the world that can do inference super quickly, it makes sense for NVIDIA to also start future-proofing themselves. Now, outside of NVIDIA, another big name that is interested in OpenAI, Apple. And this is not something you hear often, right? And so right now, with Microsoft, Apple, and NVIDIA, the three largest tech companies in the world would be invested in OpenAI. That is, talk about a vote of confidence for a startup. That is incredible. And when you think of how much OpenAI is now going to be valued at over $100 billion, and it's still a startup. Like that again is crazy. I can't imagine what an IPO would look like for a company like this, if they're even interested in going the IPO route. But there are only a very few private companies, I think SpaceX being one, and ByteDance for TikTok being the other, that are that expensive or that valuable, I should say. And so the stage is set for OpenAI's next big release. Apple is going to be integrating ChatGPT into iOS 18, which launches in September. Yeah. They're looking to invest. NVIDIA is looking to invest. And of course, the last news that we heard around this was that OpenAI has begun to show its exclusive Strawberry AI technology to government officials. And this is a big deal again. We're hearing the reasoning capabilities of Strawberry are off the charts. And so we're excited about what the rest of this year looks like. We think we're going to have some major breakthroughs coming. And we've seen what has happened with the jump from GPT-3 to GPT-4. That was like a sea change, right? And we're going to see something similar happen now with 4 to 5, as you mentioned earlier.
Really, really, really interesting. Very, very worthwhile watching. And actually, a good path into the conversation that we started with, which is, why does a company like OpenAI need to talk to the government? Why do they need to be sharing this stuff? We talked about regulation. We've talked about, the importance for everybody to be involved and have some transparency so that we can actually understand what these things do. But really, the concern here, the practical concern, is national defense. Right. This is really, really important. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it today is, as I said, I read a book recently called Unit X. I've been talking to a friend of mine who worked with the DoD. I actually had a company some time ago that worked with the DoD, and I'm a veteran. So I've got a kind of a mildly dangerous view of this thing in terms of like my level of understanding. And I wanted to talk about this because I think it's really important we understand how AI specifically connects to some of the bigger, not only national security issues, but also the political conversation that connects to that as well. So, Unit X is a book written by a guy called Raj Shaw and Chris Kershaw. They were both part of the DoD in different forms. Raj was a pilot in the Air Force, so he was, literally in the air doing the work of a pilot. And Chris Kershaw was working in the Pentagon and the White House, helping with DoD level policy. They were tagged to build a unit called the Defense Innovation Unit, the DIU. And the DIU was this specialized team that was tasked with bridging the gap between what was and still is a fairly slow-moving bureaucratic defense industry and the fast-paced world of startups in Silicon Valley that we're.
By the way, Richard, this reads and sounds just like a spy thriller. Like it sounds like the setup
It really
for
is.
a spy thriller.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, I think this book would actually make a great kind of TV series as well. It's just one of those things. So the key points that come out of this book, I obviously recommend reading it, but the key points of this book is that really the problem that we're all trying to solve is that the DoD is this massive employer. They employ 3 million full-time people. We don't even know how many other 1099 contractor style people are involved. They're also the biggest spender of money in the world. They're spending, I think it's close to $30 million a second or something crazy like that. And the idea that they can create something that is actually going to be useful was shown to be very weak when the Ukraine war started. So I'll give you some examples. Tanks, like the Abrams tanks that we make, the DoD makes, or funds the construction of, these are the most advanced tanks in the world. And when these tanks were put on the ground, these are multi-million-dollar investments, when they're put on the ground to go and defend the Ukraine against Russia's attacks, they were being taken out by $1,000 drones. Now, it's not only incredibly expensive to lose the tank and its crew, but the fact that it's taken out by $1,000 drone, which is managed essentially by an AI, chip, is really dangerous because that drone isn't the technology; it's the AI. The AI is also then communicating the location of that. If it's a kamikaze style drone, it's before it's even hitting its target. It's communicating the location of all the other tanks in the region to the other drones. So you've essentially got a swarm of drones that are speaking to each other using AI technology, locating all of the other assets on the ground. And so I think, if I remember correctly, we sent in something like 90 Abrams tanks, and almost immediately several of them were destroyed. And so it just became unnecessary to send in the rest. Now suddenly, these multi-million dollar tanks are completely useless. They're sitting there, not capable of being deployed into the field. Now, the reverse happened when the Soviet era, but these Russian defense, um, um, they're waterborne units, so they have these destroyers and other ships that they were sending into the Ukraine battlefield, um, and they were being taken out by drones as well, by these $1,000, $2,000 drones, and so suddenly you've got 100 and something ships in the Balkan Sea that are completely useless to the Russian war machine because they can get taken out by $1,000 drones. And so you've got this weird standoff. You've got a DoD that's spending trillions of dollars on building tanks and F-35s and aircraft carriers, but those things are kind of useless right now when you can get taken out by a drone, by a hypersonic missile that's being managed by AI. These hypersonic missiles fly using AI. They don't go in the parabolic arc that we expect them to go, so it's really hard to shoot them out of the sky. And they travel at 10 times the speed of sound, all driven by AI technology. So this is important because there's some cultural and structural changes that need to happen in the way that we go to war, but it's important that we understand why that means anything to you and I. Well, it means something because we might have the largest defense force or army in the world, or military in the world, but it's kind of useless when a bunch of Chinese-made drones can be thrown into the air at a moment's notice at absolute minimal cost and destroy all the infrastructure that's been created. So what's happened with the DIU is that they've tried to build this bridge where they get funding from the DoD, but they invested in startups. Anduril was one that we have spoken about. There are others. I'm trying to remember that there was Ship Drone, I think, was another one. I can't remember the exact name of the company, but a lot of these companies are building technology at Silicon Valley speed, and they're getting funding to be able to get there. And most of this technology, almost all of this technology, even if it's hardware, is being managed by AI. So again, we need to understand this perspective. We need to understand why AI is so important in our world. It's literally defending you and keeping you safe. And so the vision that the DIU has now got to create is that the transformation of the DoD, because it's working with the private sector, has changed the way we go to war. We are no longer dealing with a DoD that works at glacial speeds with lots of bureaucracy. It takes like 2 years just to get a pilot going and another 2 years to even get the contract working. We can now build something and within a couple of months start testing it. We can use the DoD's facilities for testing to test those drones, test all these different things. And by the way, this is where technology comes from. DARPA created the internet, GPS. The integrated chip was developed to allow bombers to drop multiple series of bombs out of their bomb bays. All of these technologies that we take for granted, that I pick up my phone has GPS, it has an integrated chip, it has the internet. All of that came out of military environments, out of technology that was driven by DARPA and others. So this is important. You may not like war, and I know it's not really fashionable to speak about it, but it's where innovation happens very often, and it's where the commercial application of stuff gets tested in the field first before it gets rolled out into the public. So yeah, I just wanted to make a point about this and allow people to kind of think about it, and obviously recommend Unidex as a place to start for the reading.
I love that, Richard. And we'll obviously drop the links for Unitex and links to the stories. I'm going to add some perspective here and context because I agree with you that it's important that we have this conversation. This isn't to diminish the place of ethics, especially around AI and warfare. However, the reality of our context is one where we have adversaries that are going to try to get us. We're not even just talking about physical warfare, we're talking about cyber warfare, and AI is going to play increasingly a role in all of this. One of the stories that we didn't cover this week, but it was floating around. We chose not to cover it. Was that employees at Google were protesting that Google was supplying AI technology to the government.
And by the way, it's not the first time. When Carter was the Secretary of Defense, they wouldn't even allow him on campus, and this was like what 5 years, 6 years ago.
Right? And so like for me, I think there needs to be an education. This again goes back to literacy. These are the conversations that need to happen as to why. Why is it important that our biggest tech companies, our best AI technology is accessible to our governments when you have robotic technologies that are advancing so rapidly in places like China, when you see how much they've grown and that the government has put out a mandate to say, hey, we want all of our robotics companies to reach to a certain level by the end of the year, and we'll provide the funding, we'll provide the resources, go out and conquer, right? Like we have to consider that reality as we're thinking through the ethics of the decisions that we want to make. And of course, we do need to have people with those conversations around ethics and access and just what should be done correctly and properly as a part of this conversation. It shouldn't just be, the technologists or the military experts, they're the ones having the conversation. I think the more informed people we can have as a part of this conversation, the better. And so I'll tie it back into OpenAI. And a lot of what you have seen OpenAI do over the last 6 to 12 months has been a lot of navigating political waters. Now I'll walk backwards, and you'll start to see the pattern. Notice last year, one of the first things that Sam Altman did was a world tour, and he went around meeting with governments and world leaders, having those backdoor conversations, but also suggesting to everyone globally that hey, we want to have everyone participate in this conversation. Then they moved away from focusing on super intelligence and super alignment that might be a bit further out, and this ruffled a lot of feathers. People were saying, hey, they're not focused on safety and security, but the reality is they were making a deliberate decision to say this AGI, this super intelligence that we were obsessing with initially, will have bigger problems that we need to solve now that we'll need to put our resources to. And so they disbanded that team. They founded a safety committee instead. And you saw where they started bringing on people from the NSA, government, ex-government representatives to their board, because OpenAI's technology isn't just a startup anymore. It is a matter of national security for the US government, believe it or not.
Absolutely.
And so they are going to want to have eyes and ears as close to this technology as possible. And so this week, we got confirmation, we had covered it a couple of weeks ago, that OpenAI does have a deal now to ensure that their models are shared with both the governments of the US and the UK before they're publicly released. And this, of course, outside of them getting access to the technology, will be for them to ensure that the safety of the models is verified, the security of the technology is assured. And so this will be that interplay, as you're going to, as you suggested earlier, Richard, where the companies that have reached to this frontier, they will need to be navigating political waters, working with both sides of the aisle to figure out where they can fit in, whose feathers they don't want to ruffle. To ensure that they succeed. So love this conversation. I think we definitely want to have more conversations like this.
Yeah, and maybe even bring in some guests to understand, what's happening on the ground. But good. Get out there. Start getting yourself literate when it comes to this stuff. It is a very, very tangled web of connections, and we don't profess to know all of the details, but we do want to bring some of this literacy to your conversation so that you and your organizations can make better decisions and better choices about how you use AI.
Awesome. And with that, guys, thank you so much for joining us for another week of AI updates. We're always so excited to share with you and to just have these conversations. If you enjoy them, you know what to do. Hit the thumbs up, share, like, comment. Our goal is to really spread literacy. We have exciting updates that we're going to be sharing in the next coming weeks around in-person events that I can't wait to talk about. But overall, engage with us on social media, send us a message, what content you'd want to see us focus on, or any topics that you'd want us to see us dive deeper in. But again, thank you for the support. Remember, we do have a paid subscription, so you can go to maginative.com and support us by subscribing to our Maginative Plus membership. We do offer AI speaking engagements for executive keynotes and training for a lot of different companies. And we're booking out quickly. So if you need training in 2-3 months, now is the time that you want to start engaging us, because beyond that, it's going to be always a hit or a miss when it comes to our availability. But with that, Richard, any last words before we wrap up?
Oh, yeah, I think just start using this stuff, right? Write prompts, create stuff, make things, get your children to make things. That's the easiest way to get literate, is to actually start, just like learning a language. Yeah, go to the country, start speaking the language, order that coffee, and get your hands dirty.
I love that. All right, everyone, enjoy the weekend. Until next time, one love.